In an argumentative essay, you're trying to convince the audience. So, how do you make revisions based on the audience you are trying to convince? In this lesson, you will learn how to revise your essay to target your audience by using the words, evidence, and ideas most likely to convince them. Let's review. A textbook is written to inform. A novel tells a story. An argumentative essay, though, is written to try to convince the audience. A common mistake that writers make is that they make no attempt to reach the audience. So, what you should be doing here, you have the writer, which would be you have your audience, and you're trying to capture them, or at least their attention. But let's think of it this way. You're attempting to hit a target with your bow and arrow, and instead of actually facing towards the target, you turn away from it. You don't make an attempt to hit it. Therefore, you miss your intended mark. This is much the same way as if you don't make an attempt to reach your audience. It's rather fruitless. In this lesson, first you're going to identify the audience of your essay by asking yourself, who will likely read this essay? Next, you're going to reread your essay and create 2 to 3 ways to better convince the audience. And finally, you're going to insert changes in your essay to enhance the argument. I want to start off by asking myself, who will likely read my essay? Well, let me think of the topic of my essay, which is school lunches. When considering the thesis of my paper, I have to think, who will read my essay and actually care about this topic? Well, I would think the most likely would be my fellow students. I know my teacher might read it, hopefully, and possibly school leaders, and maybe even parents. But let's focus on fellow students here. By identifying my peers as my audience, I can now make revisions to win them over. So how do I go about winning them over? What are some ways that I might be able to better convince my fellow students? Well, let's think of it this way. Maybe I could tell a story that they can relate to. Or I can use words that they think are cool. Or maybe even I can find some evidence that they might really agree with. If I get them to agree with me, they might agree on something else later on in the essay. So let's focus on a story. What's a story that will help me actually win over my audience? This is a question I can ask myself. Remember, it's all about convincing the audience. It's all about winning over the audience. And in this case, my fellow students. So let's see if I can lead off with this quick story. As I walk into my first class after lunch, I hear Jose complaining. What was that slop they served today? I agree, mystery meat is not a good thing. I slip into my seat near the back of the room and find Chandra with her head down. Are you okay? I ask. Headache. Could not eat that pizza one more time, she responded without opening her eyes. Now, this is a story that grabs the reader's attention, but now that I have this story, I need to think, where might this best fit? So I look back at my boxes and bullets for my essay. I have my claim, and then I have the 3 major things I'm covering. Where might this fit? Well, in this case, I may put it at the very beginning of the story. It might fit somewhere else a little bit better, but I have to play around. By looking at the outline here, I can see where it might help, and I think it's a good lead-in for my introductory paragraph. So let's take a look here at how this leads in. So you have the story, and then you move into your introductory paragraph. So the reader is already thinking where you're headed. Then you present the argument. Let's review the steps for today's lesson. First, you identify the audience of your essay by asking yourself, who will likely read this essay? Second step, you'll want to create 2 to 3 ways to better convince the audience. And finally, you're going to have to insert the changes in your essay to enhance the argument. In this lesson, you learned how to revise for your target audience by using words, evidence, and ideas most likely to convince them.